Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about leadership. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, as a software engineering tech lead, do you have a framework for leadership? Uh, well, I have my own. I don't follow, well, maybe it is. Maybe I don't really know if somebody else has coined the thing. I haven't taken the time to write it down, but the basic principles I usually follow is to try to lead by example. That's number one. If I can't do the job on almost the same sort of level as the people that I work with, then I shouldn't be in charge, because I strongly believe that anybody who leads a team of specialists has to be one of the specialists, because anything below that is, well, it's not going to work very well. Leadership, and I don't know, I know how we got there. I just think it's silly. I truly believe that it's silly to hire people who are supposed to be leaders who don't actually know the work. Because it's very difficult to be a leader when you don't actually know what the people that you are leading are actually doing. I've never found that to work. I know that people will argue with me about that, but I've never seen it work, and this is just my personal observation. I've never seen an effective leader or manager who had of software teams who wasn't a software developer to begin with, and even the ones that were half baked, who sort of claim that they are software developers when in reality are actually really shit at it as well. I've found that the ideal state is to have, which is of course where the problem really lies, because we don't have an ample supply of very highly technically skilled and socially skilled software developers. Because if we had, there would be no problem usually. But that's number one. Try to lead by example. Number two would be what I call create a fence around your team. I usually make the analogy to sheep herding, whereas the herder, or like the person who's going to herd the sheep, ideally what you'd want is to create a little rule framework, something very loose. Like, it doesn't have, as not a wall or anything like that. A rickety fence is fine, because it gives the sensation of, like, it makes, you want to create a relaxed environment for your sheep or for your team, but you have to create some boundaries so that you can trust that there's a predictable result that will come out of the work that is being done. And then all you as the team leader really have to do is to make sure that all the sheep are happy, and that there's one way in, one way out. And it's because what basically happens is that you control the communication channels and requirements, etc., how they come in. You're always in the loop of everything that happens when it transitions into where the team is, and you don't have to worry so much about micromanaging people or things like that, because as long is that you know your fence really well, and if you know how the fence is built up, you know that the sheep are not going to jump over or like get away somewhere, and like you're going to have to start chasing them or things like that, right? And so that analogy, if you keep that with you, that is sort of the same. If you think about it in a software development perspective, if you have a CI pipeline, for example, when you're going to merge things to master and release them into production, usually you have automated testing, you might have code reviews, you might have, maybe you have a QA, a staging environment, a testing environment, or something like that. You have all of these quality checks that you make before you release things into production. That is your fence. It's the fence around the code or the work process itself. That is exactly what you can call it gateways. It's the same thing, when you want to go on trip or something like that, you have to pass through customs and like all these checks to make sure that you don't have like any dangerous stuff on you when you're going to get on the plane and things like that. Same principle. I follow exactly the same principles. As long as I can validate I can trust that the process that has been created for still releasing things into production, I'm fine. I'm happy. I don't. If that's where it gets so relaxed. A lot of my people that I work with, sometimes they are worried that, I'm going to make a mistake, etc., and I go, well, if you make a mistake, then you make a mistake, because if we can't trust the gateway system that we have created, or the fence, as I call it, then that's not really your fault. Then then what the problem isn't really that you made a mistake here, because we can forgive mistakes and we can fix them. But if you try, as long as the fence is there and we can trust that you understand where the bounds are of what's okay and what's not okay, then everything's fine. The same thing goes for when you do leadership types of things, where the fence can still be something you put up, but in a social environment. And what I usually use for that is very simple. I'm a big fan of documenting work processes, how you should do things. I mean, I don't really like having too much documentation, but checklists for how to execute certain tasks, such as my favorite one is the first day README file. I always have one of those where I write down, and this is what I do on my first day, and then I usually, because I've never been in a team when anybody has taken the time to document an onboarding guide ever. My team is the only one that's doing it in my company, and that's a company of thousands of people at this point. As far as I know, I'm the only team leader who does it. And so basically it's just step by step, like each check mark is like do this, then do that, then do this. It's like instructions for how to, boil pasta or something like that. Same deal, right? And that gives you an intro into, okay, how are you going to get access to all the system? How are you going to do all the things? What are like all the things that you need in order to do good work here? And then there's always one step that I add. That is, I truly believe that this is one of the biggest benefits to writing things down, and that is that when you have written something down, it feels official to people. It's the reason why you can use holy texts and doctrines like the law books and so forth in such a powerful way, because when you make something feel special, it becomes special. And in our context, it's silly, but it's just a README file, a markdown file where I have written down the principles around how you are expected to collaborate in this team that you're joining, like my team in this case. And it's really simple. I only have 4 rules. Over communicate, trust your people, produce results, because we are doing a job here, output is expected, and then fulfillment. Feel like you should be able to work with things that makes you feel fulfilled. Now I always add a few examples, like concrete example, like if the over communicate one thing is like no lone wolves type of thing. We work as a team, like you don't sit by yourself. If your teammates need help, you are expected to help them before you help yourself. And these sorts of examples which gives you a context for what these things actually mean. And those rules are just the rules that I try to follow, because I like to keep things a very high level in a sense, because I don't believe in being having these very draconian rules. The simpler the better, because what I'm trying to just make people, I'm just trying to create a situation where, as I said, it's a quality check where most people can follow those rules in a fairly easy manner. It's just that they have to be there, they have to be written down, so that when the normal thing happens, which is the classic one, people don't get help. People might ask something in Slack and nobody answers them, or they don't do code reviews, or things are waiting and ready for code review for a million years and they never actually never move things forward, because they do the thing that all software developers do, is that, I'm done with my work now, I'm going to put that in ready for code review, and then I'm going to pick up the next thing, because I don't think about helping anybody else, I'm just thinking about my own work. These sorts of human mistakes, and in many cases it's a little bit of laziness as well, and as me thinking versus us thinking, that behavior, we need to, when you have these rules written down, it's very easy for you to just point and say, well, you're not really following the rules. And it becomes very difficult for the person who who performs poorly, who doesn't follow the rules, to make an argument against you as the leader, because what you don't want is for there to be an argument between the two of you. And it's the same thing with, if you have a law book. When you have a law for something, it's usually that someone has, when you send someone to prison, it's not the judge you are having the battle with usually in the courtrooms. It is the law itself. I hope that makes sense to you. You move the perspective from that you as the leader are the person who's accusing somebody else of breaking your rules, to moving it to you're breaking the team's rules. Because this was written down and you were informed on your first day that this was something you should know how to do. And that's why it's very important to keep it easy and light, because that way it's very easy for you to just ask, oh, why didn't you follow rule A, B, and C? And they go, well, and then you know, some people will always make the excuse, oh, I didn't know about it, or I didn't, you know, accept. They try to like excuse themselves, and then you go, but it's written down right there. And then they say, oh yeah, but I forgot, I didn't know, I wasn't really sure. What does the rule say? That's where it's really useful when it's a simple rule, because most of them don't read it because they think it's a joke. And which is, of course, as I said, it is a joke. Technically, it's not a joke, but the idea is no one would ever expect them to. They don't think that they have to follow the rule. They don't think they have to memorize it, and they usually don't. But now they have broken the rule, and so you can leverage the fact that they have broken it and simply ask them, "Do you know what it says?" And they won't, because they're not going to memorize it. And you don't have to get angry with them, because this is going to be super embarrassing for them. And it's a mental thing. It is really a mental thing where you think that this thing that you wrote down has some type of magical power. No, it's actually still just Fredrik who has a rule that was created, and you broke it. It's just that I took the time to write it down. So now the manager, my manager, and your team members, everybody else sees that you haven't actually done what you are expected to do. If I hadn't written it down, it would have been a conversation between me, and my manager would have looked at me as like, oh, Fredrik has all these rules and he doesn't inform people about them and so forth. So it's probably good that, you know, he does that, because now you can play the victim card. The person who has made the transgression can play the victim card, but he can't, or she can't, if it's written down, which is so important, because now we go from that they play the victim card, that it's unclear or it's unsure. I have written it down, and you haven't done your job. That's a very difficult. It's sort of like failing your drug test. There is nothing you can say to excuse yourself from the fact that you failed the drug test. So what I want you to take away from this is that my leadership frameworks are usually very simple. I try to lead by example. In other words, I truly believe that if you're going to lead engineers, you have to be one. That's number one. Number two is try to create a fence around your little herd of sheep. You create quality checks and gateways that you have to pass, just as with unit tests and code coverage and things like that. Try to create a little work framework, very simple, something that is like really stupidly obvious. As I said, my favorite ones are over-communicate, trust, results, and fulfillment. These sorts of things, and give some examples and actually write it down, because if you write it down, it becomes a very powerful tool for you when you have to deal with those, because it doesn't happen all that often. Guys, I've done this for years now, and usually you never have an issue with it, and the few times where it sort of becomes relevant, it only happens once or twice, because as I said, because when you do this thing, people go and read it, because you don't have to get angry at them. They just made a mistake, or they were lazy, or like some reason, etc. So it's very rare that you have a nefarious person you're dealing with. It's just that they didn't take the time to actually make sure that they have adjusted to the same way of working as everybody else. Sure, sometimes you get someone who's a real problem and you have to get rid of them, and then the rules still make a really strong case, because when you have written it down and made sure that there's an onboarding guide or something where they are expected to know that stuff, nothing they say in the spur of the moment when they are sort of caught with their pants down will excuse them from the fact that they don't know what the rules are. As I said, it's like failing a drug test or things like that. There is no, because everybody tries to play the victim. Everybody, as soon as there are no guilty people in prison. It's the same deal, right? But if you write it down, you don't have to make a conversation where like it becomes an argument between you and the person working in the team. It's just something that, okay, you didn't follow the rule. It's not the big deal. Just make sure that you know what it says, and in the future do better. And it's the same thing. It's like you didn't write unit tests, and now there was a production issue. All right, cool. Remember to write unit tests next time. This is usually the way I do, like the closest thing I have for a work framework or a leadership framework, and it's worked pretty well. Have a great day.